The agenda this week assessed how to address violence on Toronto Transit, explored the legacy of former Ontario Lieutenant Governor David Onley, asked what the new NDP leader needs to do to prepare for the next provincial election, and learned what rural municipalities are doing to support older adults. The agenda's Week in Review begins debating the need for bail reform.
How typical is it for somebody out on bail to go out and commit a violent offense while out on bail?
That's a great question, and I'm not aware of any comprehensive data that would indicate how common this kind of situation is. I can tell you the data that I am aware of. In Ontario, on any given night, more than 70% of people in our provincial jails are legally innocent. They're there on remand. They're either waiting for a determination of their bail or they've been denied bail and are waiting for a trial. And it didn't always used to be this way. 20 years ago, the majority of people in provincial and territorial jails had been found guilty and sentenced to an offense, and they were serving a sentence for something that they were found to have done. So when we talk about our overcrowded jails and our bloated justice system that is slow moving, where people charged with relatively minor offenses are spending a lot of time in custody, part of that and a big driver of that is the increase in remand detention. And I think it's really important to think about the vast majority of the people who are in this situation. And we've heard this, this morning, which I think is really important. The vast majority of people are not being detained and are not in jail and have been charged with exceptionally serious violent offenses. We see a pattern of people being released on bail and then rearrested for breaching their bail conditions. That underlying conduct might not itself be criminal. So for instance, if you are released with a curfew and you breach that curfew, you can be brought back into jail, you can be rearrested and charged with a new criminal offense for being out on the street at 11 p.m. And I think it's really worth thinking about what the data tells us, because the criminologists would tell us that our bail system in Canada has not become more lenient over time. In fact, it's become more restrictive and more risk averse, leading to more people spending time in jail while they're legally innocent and before they've been convicted of anything.
Okay, Chief McSween, maybe I can get you to weigh in on this. Do you have either hard data or do you have sufficient anecdotal evidence based on your experience as to how often people who are out on bail commit violent offenses while on bail?
Well, let me just give you this statistic that specific here to York Region, not across the province, and there's a lot of work being done right now to compile these statistics provincially. But in 2021 in York Region, we as an organization seized 121 violent crime handguns, okay? As a result, 31 of the offenders who we charged with offenses related to those guns were out on a court order of some sort. So that's a quarter of the people who were responsible for the crimes related to those guns were reoffending again, once again, in relation to the gun charge, already being on either bail or another type of court order. So it goes to show you that people are not abiding by their conditions. And the reality is what we're seeing across the province is more and more people who are charged and with a violent crime and are released on bail are back before the courts again, breaching their bail and again and again. And the problem with that is the types of offenses they're responsible for or alleged to have been committed are violent crimes. We are not talking about the majority of people. We're talking about that one section of people who are not adhering to their bail conditions, are essentially kicking sand in the face of the justice system and knowing that in all likelihood, they're going to get released again.
And just so I'm clear, Chief, it would be your view, I presume, that quarter of offenders who were originally charged with the possession of guns related to violent circumstances, they should not have been out on bail. Is that your position?
Well, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that when they were charged with the crime gun offense, they were on a release already. And that's the point. The point is they were not abiding by the conditions, and here they are again back before the courts on a charge related to a firearm. That's unacceptable, and that poses a significant risk to the community. And
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay, let me get Teresa on that, and then I want to hear from Laura as well. You heard the chief's concern. Is that a legitimate concern in your view?
Well, I think where the chief and I can agree is that the current system isn't working. The criminal justice system isn't effective in preventing reoffenders. And the issue is that the criminal justice system doesn't get to the root of the issue. I think if we want to deter violence, we have to address the root of the issue of violence. And violence is often born from inequality in our communities. I think really to get to the root of the problem, we really need to be addressing the social and public health concern that is born from violence. So we need to be investing in mental health and addiction services. We need to be investing in guaranteed livable income. We need to be investing in safe housing, public washrooms, and all of these social services that keep our communities safe and healthy.
Lex, when speaking with transit riders, you've done a number of sort of conversations, exposés on the start of that. Do they want to see more security in police?
I think it's hard to have one response. I mean, we have more than 1 million people who take the TTC every day. So there are many different people who feel different ways. I think there are certainly people who feel like they would feel more safe with more police on the system. But at the same time, we know that Toronto Police's own data shows that racialized Torontonians are more likely to have worse outcomes with police. So, for example, Black and Indigenous riders in particular maybe are not feeling as safe with police, or they may feel less safe having police there. I think most riders I've spoken to say that there needs to be more of a coordinated approach here, considering some of the root causes that might be driving this violence, rather than just policing away a problem that can't be policed away.
All right, Diane, I'm going to come to you. We're going to pick up on a couple of thoughts that Lex had mentioned. But over the weekend, there were still more reports of attacks, despite this announcement last week that, we are going to bring in more police. Do we know if more security and more police will keep workers and passengers safe?
That is not evidence-based at all. And I think, at the heart of it, what we're suggesting, because the narrative is very much about people experiencing crisis, and I appreciate that others are pointing out that that is not exclusively the case, but we're saying that if people are in mental health crisis, the answer is to police them. That is suggesting that if you are in crisis, you are a criminal. I think that's an extremely problematic response. And even if we have people like myself, a crisis worker, who are going into these spaces, where are we going to take people? If they're unhoused, they have nowhere to go. If they are experiencing crisis, we don't have enough community-based mental health supports to actually provide people with the kind of support that they need. So I don't see that this is effective in any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, again, I think it makes people feel very unsafe in a lot of cases, especially if they're marginalized, and particularly for my folks who are unhoused, who are over-policed, they don't feel safe.
All right, I'm going to go read another Toronto Star article. This is from the perspective of Matt Elliott, who wrote an opinion piece earlier this week in the Toronto Star. Rewind a decade ago, and riding the system used to be more routine interactions with TTC workers. You'd board streetcars by the front door and pay at a fare box next to the operator. Entering a station generally meant going past a booth with a real-life person selling tokens. There were at least 2 employees on every subway train, a driver and, of course, a guard who would be responsible for making sure platforms were clear and doors were safely closed. These days, all of that has changed. John, it feels like there are less workers on the system. Is this a factor when we're talking about safety and security?
Absolutely a factor. As we sit here today, the TTC is positioning itself to remove the guard's position on subway trains. We're going from a 2-person operation to a 1-person operation. I think it's unconscionable to think that the safety of our riders is paramount when you're removing 50% of your resources from that vehicle. It's a 500-foot train that's moving in rush hour with 2,000 people on board, and we're cutting back. How is the operator of that train supposed to safely maneuver that train through tunnels, through stations, but see 500 feet behind them and ensure the safety of their passengers? We're seeing the cuts, we're seeing technology take over. You cannot take the human element out of the service we provide and the frontline service and the visibility. And so I think that the TTC needs to rethink their position when it comes to cutting jobs. I think they need more visibility and more customer service.
This is no doubt going to be a hard question to answer, but what was the one moment in the funeral, above all others, that stood out for you?
I would say the bagpipes. The bagpipes playing, it signified in many ways the end, in some ways. But in other ways, it really strengthened me because I realized there's so much that has to be done up ahead. And in that split second, my spirit, my heart just felt pain. But then, my spirit, heart then felt strength that we as Canadians have so much to do up ahead to tackle this large and looming reality. And that is that there are so many Canadians right now who are struggling, who are hurting, and they need to know that they're not alone. And it is just something that I take great honor moving forward to champion.
Whose tie is that?
That is Dad's tie. And it was the only tie that I thought was suitable for today to wear, to honor him and to remember him as well.
Great choice.
Thank you.
Well, we have three others here who knew him well, and we'd like to get some feedback from all of you on what you think. We're going to have this conversation about what we still need to do, because Michael called me a week ago and challenged us to have this conversation on TVO, so we're going to do that. But before, we need to get a better sense, and Christine, why don't you start us off here? David Onley's legacy to the province of Ontario, what is it?
It's a great legacy. He's a wonderful, kind man, but he really was a true champion for people with disabilities, and he didn't hold back from saying so, and he listened to everyone. He always had time for everyone, and he learned from that, and he went and spoke publicly about it. I think that is a true leader, and that's what I will always remember him for.
Lauren, how about you? His legacy in your view?
Well, I think the most important thing that I realized is that I so valued my relationship with David that became stronger during COVID. Because, of course, we weren't able to gather and meet like we normally would. And upon his passing, and then in talking with friends within the disability community at the church on Monday, I realized that the deep relationship I felt, the mentorship, the sponsorship, the encouragement that I received from David, I wasn't alone. That he made every single person feel just as special, just as empowered, just as feeling strong that they can do more as well. Where he found the time, I'll never know, but he was so generous with the time. It would be a text here, an email there, just to encourage us to join him in making an accessible country. Yeah.
Thea.
I think I got to know David through Twitter. I was noticing one of the problems with the legislation was that we had just recently passed the employment accessibility standard, which talked about changing hiring practices, but we hadn't changed anything for the built environment. So I tagged him in a tweet saying, what did they have to do to Queen's Park for him to become Lieutenant Governor? And he replied. And at the time, he was the Accessibility Special Advisor to the government and invited me in.
So this was after he was LG?
After he was LG. Mm-hmm. And we both lamented that. If only we had met sooner or started talking sooner. But he said it was so exciting to talk to me, as exciting as it was for me to talk to him, because I had a lot of the missing pieces of the puzzle about what was going wrong in the built environment. And I think what I loved best about him was his ability to be likable, even though he could be incredibly pointed in criticism.
I think one of the things that Merritt is in a good position to do is to not say this literally out loud, but I raised it with her just to sort of make the point. I'm mad as hell too, but I understand why you feel aggrieved. I understand how you feel cheated. I understand that you need a lot more sincerity and action on the part of the governments you elect. I think that's really going to be the turning point for the election in my mind. unless, we all of a sudden start smiling again and everybody's happy by 2026, I think this is going to be a very unhappy electorate that all the leaders are going to have to face.
Kim, I remember David Crombie saying on this program, anger is not a good governing principle. Can you really gin people up and keep them angry for 3.5 years till next time?
It's harder to do for that 3 years. But what I'm actually looking for is swagger. I looked at that last election campaign, and neither Stephen Del Duca nor Andrea Horwath came at the electorate with swagger. In the 2018 campaign, Andrea was full of swagger. She was ready to govern. She was ready to lead. She had the confidence to do it.
She was in first place in the polls for a while.
Up until she showcased, or she refused at that point to showcase what her front bench looked like. So what Marit needs to do is have the poise and confidence that she's going to do this, have that human connection point, showcase this amazing team that she is assembling that has leaders that have been in the House that people have trusted, the stakeholders and the public have trusted, and that can show what is her life as a premier going to be? What is she going to do to make your life better? And you also have to consider that with 29 to 36% voter turnout, people want a reason to get off their couches and come and show up to vote, that it's going to be different.
29 to 36?
Depending on the riding. Certainly some ridings were terrible.
Because I think province-wide it was what last time? 40-something?
It was around 40, but in some ridings you saw numbers that were 29%. In our last municipal campaigns across the province, they were definitely in that low 20s, mid to mid 30s. People need a reason to get up. And I'll tell you, the more that leaders can showcase their personality, their authenticity, and have a bit of hope for people with that genuine swagger, that's how you bring more people.
All right, Carl, tell me this. You've worked for 4 different New Democrat leaders over the years, and one of the most precious commodities those leaders have in between elections is time. They have to manage their time brilliantly, frankly. What would you tell Marit Stiles about what she needs to do with her time over the next 3.5 years? How should she spend it?
Well, she should expose herself to the electorate. She needs to be known. She's unknown right now, in as much as she was, a successful school trustee and very well spoken opposition MPP. Most Ontarians don't know who she is. She's an unknown entity. So her mission right now is to frame our political persona for the Ontarians. And it's something that you cannot do if you just stay at Queen's Park. You need to get on the road, to be in the community, and not just the community where New Democrats have succeeded or could succeed. You need to go elsewhere. You need to be seen and heard everywhere.
Michelle, can I get you on that? 3.5 years. How should she spend her time? You used to do communications for Andrea Horwath. What'd you learn from that you would apply to next time?
So I actually tend to agree with Carl. I think spending time out in communities in all parts of the province is a very important thing for Marit to be doing right now. And I would point out that she actually is doing that work since she formally launched her leadership bid. By my count, scouring her social media, she's been to at least 18 places. And we're talking about regions where we hold seats from Ottawa to Waterloo. We're talking about regions where we lost ridings in the last election, like Timmins. And we're also talking about regions where we don't have a presence, places like Barrie. So I think that's really important work for Marit to be doing.
Would you advise her to go to Barrie, a seat the NDP has never won? Would you say that's a good use of time?
Look, we're talking about growing and strengthening and expanding support for the party. So I do think, you're going to be looking at places like the 905. I think you want to expand in places of strength like Northern Ontario and Southwestern Ontario. Absolutely.
I should just put this to you, Sarah. I mean, Andrea Horwath made a lot of visits to Brampton over the previous 4 years. Didn't help you hold your seat. Ultimately, it did not. So is it still worth it to put that to labor in those vineyards that so often don't pay off for you?
Well, I think it's important to show up, and I think for community that matters. When we look at Andrea being in Brampton time and time again, it did matter. Unfortunately, the results were what they were, but
helped you the first time,
it
just not the second
absolutely
time.
helped the first time, and I think there were many factors at play the second time around that resulted in the outcomes that we had. But I think it matters to community. To Michelle's point, I think showing up in places like Barrie or Newmarket, where we may not have had a seat, or maybe it seems unlikely that we would win there. I think for the the base and New Democrats and progressives in those communities, it does matter that the leader is showing up.
Any idea what percentage of your population are seniors?
Yes, so we have a very skewed percentage of that population. So 55% of our residents are 55 years and older, and the average for the province is 33%. So you can tell we are really skewed towards having far more seniors than the rest of the province.
You are a little disproportionately older than the rest of the province.
Yes.
Okay. Is that good? Is that bad? Is that what is that?
It's good in the sense that we have a lot of residents with wide ranges of experiences, so they can share their experiences with us. It's not so good when you think about a vulnerable population. And, you know, some seniors are fine on their own, but some seniors, just like the rest of the age groups, need more help. So it can be a problem for us to make sure our residents are able to stay where they want to stay in our community.
Gotcha. How about Simcoe County? Any idea what percentage is senior?
Absolutely. We're 19.9% 65 plus, so we're above the provincial and the national average. And again, a great history, great culture, but lots of challenges for our senior population because much of the communities are small, rural, and really spread apart across the entire region. So presents some challenges for our aging population.
Why do seniors like to live there in disproportionate numbers if there are so many challenges with regards to access to services and appropriate housing and all of that?
I think that's part of our great, a very rich history in the county of Simcoe. We have a lot of farmland, a lot of farmers, and small municipalities that have been here for, you know, over 100 to 150, 200 years. And so they're very proud of that heritage and their culture, and proud to live where they are. And so we're working really hard to ensure that they have all the services and amenities so they can continue to live in their homes within the county.
So you have multiple generations of people who came maybe a century and a half ago and have just stayed.
Very much so.
Huh. How about in your experience?
It's pretty much the same. We have a lot of farmland, a lot of rural areas, but we do have, fortunately, amongst some of our seniors, researchers who work with the Rural Ontario Institute, and they've looked at why young people leave. So it's kind of the opposite side of the question. And I thought it would be the lack of employment opportunities, but really it's the lack of the housing that young people want. So not enough apartments, condos, small houses, and also not enough amenities that they want. So not enough opportunities to go out to a bar or to go dancing, to a club, or even just, you know, go to a maker space and make something together. So it's interesting when you talk about why you have a lot of seniors, you also have to look at, well, why is your youth leaving?
Do you, okay, this is going to sound like a really dumb question. Do you have a movie theater in your community?
No.
Do you have a nightclub or something like that in your community?
No.
So, okay, these are things young people like to do, and
yes,
there you go.
Yeah.
Any chance of either of those things happening?
Well, we did have a drive-in open nearby, which was
cool.
exciting. Yeah, the nightclub, I know some of the young people would love to do it, but, you know, they need, I guess, venture capital. They don't have the money to do it.
That's just some of what we covered this week. You can find more, including the full conversations, on our website, tvo.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.